Let's set a scene for you. Picture this. You are looking at a 24-year-old kid walking onto a major studio lot, and he has just secured basically the greatest, most unprecedented film contract in the history of the industry.
Oh, absolutely. The ultimate golden ticket.
Right. We are talking about complete creative control, final cut. And this on his very first movie.
Which is, I mean, it's practically unheard of. Even today, studios just did not hand over the keys to the kingdom to a first-time director like that.
Never. And he actually uses that golden ticket to make a movie that ends up topping the greatest films of all time lists for, well, decades.
Yeah, consistently #1.
But the real mystery here, the thing we're looking at today, is the whiplash. Because how does that exact same boy genius, decades later, find himself completely locked out of the studio system?
Right, it's a huge pivot.
It really is. How does the ultimate cinematic auteur end up funding his art by doing commercials for Paul Masson wine, famously promising we will sell no wine before it's time?
Or spending his final days voicing a planet-eating cartoon robot.
Yes. Unicron and the Transformers, the movie. Like, how does that happen?
Well, people often look at that trajectory and they just assume it's this massive tragedy, right? Like a classic story of a guy who peaked in his 20s and just spent the rest of his life in a slow, sad decline.
Which is the standard Hollywood myth.
Exactly. But diving into the source material we have today, a completely different narrative actually emerges. Those later years, they weren't a tragedy at all. They really mark the birth of modern independent filmmaking.
So welcome to this deep dive into the life and legacy of Orson Welles. We've got a comprehensive biographical overview in front of us, and today we are mapping out the rise, the fall, and the relentless reinvention of this unstoppable creative force.
It's going to be a fascinating one.
It is, because this isn't just a story about movies. It is a story about what happens when absolute, unfiltered genius collides with an uncompromising corporate industry.
And to understand how someone even conquers Hollywood by age 24, you really have to look at where that sheer audacity comes from.
Oh, for sure.
Because in Wells's case, it was forged out of some pretty profound early tragedy.
Yeah, you look at this kid, and by age 15, he has already lost both of his parents. His mother, who was a concert pianist, she died of hepatitis when he was just 9 years old.
Which is devastating enough on its own.
Right. And then you have his father, an inventor who actually made a fortune on a specific type of bicycle lamp. But he eventually succumbed to severe alcoholism.
Yeah.
And when Welles was 15, his father died of heart and kidney failure, just completely alone in the Chicago hotel.
And the psychological weight of that on a teenager is staggering, because just prior to his death, Welles had actually told his father that he refused to see him until he stopped drinking.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he carried that guilt for literally the rest of his life. He even admitted in his late 60s that he still couldn't forgive himself for it.
That is heavy.
It is. But that kind of unresolved trauma, it forces a child to grow up instantly. I mean, you don't have a safety net anymore, so you have to build this armor of absolute independence.
And the environment that really nurtured that independence was this place called the Todd Seminary for Boys in Illinois. There was a teacher there named Roger Hill who realized, standard schooling is just going to crush a kid like this.
Completely crush him.
So he gives Welles free rein. He lets him follow his obsessions, experimenting endlessly with theater and the school's radio station.
Which set a massive precedent for his life.
Exactly. Welles never really learned to operate within normal boundaries because, frankly, he was never forced to.
And that perfectly sets up what happens when he graduates at 16. So he gets this scholarship offer for Harvard.
Which most kids would kill for.
Right. But he ignores it entirely. Instead, he takes his inheritance, goes on a donkey cart sketching tour of Ireland, and then he just strides into the Gate Theatre in Dublin.
A 16-year-old kid.
A 16-year-old.
Yeah.
He walks right up to the manager, Hilton Edwards, and completely bluffs him. He claims to be this famous Broadway star from New York.
Which is insane to think about today. Imagine like a modern 16-year-old walking into the headquarters of a major tech firm, claiming to be a senior software developer, bluffing their way into a job, and then actually shipping an industry-changing product.
It's exactly like that.
It makes you wonder, how much of his early success was raw talent and how much was just sheer unadulterated confidence.
Well, for Welles, confidence was basically the mechanism that forced people to look at his talent. He weaponized that bluff to completely bypass traditional gatekeepers.
It worked, obviously.
It did. Hilton Edwards actually admitted later that he suspected the kid was lying the whole time. But the sheer brashness of the attempt, combined with this incredibly impassioned audition, It just won him over.
He just didn't wait around for permission.
No, he didn't wait for permission to be great, and that became the driving philosophy behind his entire career.
And that refusal to wait for permission is exactly what propels him when he hits New York during the Great Depression. By the time he's 20 years old, he's working for the New Deal's Federal Theater Project.
A huge deal at the time.
Yeah, and he directs this groundbreaking adaptation of Shakespeare's Macbeth. But he doesn't just do a standard Macbeth. He takes a 150-person African-American cast, strips away the traditional Scottish setting, and relocates the whole play to a mythical Haitian court.
Right. He substituted the witches with Haitian voodoo practitioners.
Exactly. And mounting a production of that scale with an all-black cast in 1936, it became known as the Voodoo Macbeth. It was revolutionary.
Oh, it was unheard of. And he was bypassing administrative red tape left and right to do it. He was even secretly funneling his own outside earnings into the project's budget just to elevate the production value.
Because he was making a fortune on the side. I mean, while he's revolutionizing the stage, he co-founded the Mercury Theater with John Houseman and staged this modern dress anti-fascist Julius Caesar using lighting that looked like the Nuremberg rallies.
Which was visually stunning.
Right. But while doing all that, he's also conquering the radio industry. His schedule was absolute madness. Between 1935 and 1937, the guy was earning up to $2,000 a week.
In the 1930s. That is astronomical money.
It is.
Yeah.
And to pull that off, he was literally hiring ambulances to shuttle him through Manhattan traffic.
Oh, yeah, the ambulance story.
He would jump out of an ambulance, sprint into a radio studio, and just scan his lines seconds before the on-air light clicked on.
See, reading about that frantic pace in the sources, it raises a really fascinating question about his motivation.
Yeah.
Was his ambition purely driven by artistic passion, or was it a desperate need to outrun those childhood demons and the guilt we discussed earlier? Because stopping the silence must have been terrifying for him.
It was probably a potent mix of both, honestly. But the result of that frantic pace was an absolute total mastery of the medium. He wasn't just performing on the radio. He was figuring out how to manipulate it.
Yes.
And that mastery culminated on October 30, 1938 with The War of the Worlds.
The big one.
He adapts the H.G. Wells novel, but he formats it as a series of breaking news bulletins that interrupt a regular music broadcast.
And the reason this caused a panic, or at least, the massive media narrative of a panic, wasn't just because people were gullible. You really have to look at the psychological state of America in 1938.
Right, the context matters.
It does. The Great Depression is still lingering, and anxieties about a looming war in Europe are at an absolute boiling point. People were accustomed to their radio programs being suddenly interrupted by tense, breaking news about geopolitical crises.
So when these dial-spinning listeners caught the middle of a broadcast saying Martians were actively invading New Jersey, it tapped directly into that existing underlying dread.
Exactly. He weaponized the mechanics of radio and the anxieties of his audience all at once. He took the inherent authority of the news bulletin and used it to deliberately blur the line between fiction and reality.
It was an unprecedented media spectacle.
Truly.
And that spectacle is exactly what makes Hollywood come calling. George Shaver, the president of RKO Pictures, he lures Wells out to Los Angeles with that 63-page golden ticket contract.
The one we talked about at the start.
Yep. Total creative control. Final cut. And he uses it to make Citizen Kane in 1941. He co-writes it, produces it, directs it, and stars in it.
And this is where his theatrical audacity really met cinematic technology. He partnered with cinematographer Greg Toland to pioneer a technique known as deep focus.
Right, and for those who might not know, in traditional filmmaking, the camera focuses on a specific subject, like a face in the foreground, and that leaves the background totally blurry. If the director wants you to look at something else, they just cut to a new shot.
Right, it guides your eye forcefully.
But deep focus keeps everything from 18 inches away from the lens all the way back to 200 feet in absolute sharp relief.
And achieving that, it isn't just a stylistic choice, it's an intense technical hurdle. Toland and Wells had to use newly developed, highly sensitive film stocks, specialized coated lenses, and these incredibly intense arc lamps on set just to expose the film properly.
I read that it meant closed sets were blindingly bright.
Oh, they were, and physically exhausting to work in because of the heat from those lights.
But the payoff was that audiences could watch a conversation happening up close while simultaneously observing someone doing something crucial through a window in the far background. Wells wanted the screen to literally mimic the human eye.
Right. He forced the viewer to actively search the frame and decide what was important for themselves, rather than just passively accepting whatever the director pointed the camera at.
Which is brilliant.
Yeah.
But, unfortunately, the visual brilliance was completely overshadowed by the subject matter. The script, which he co-wrote with Herman J. Mankiewicz, was a heavily critical, thinly veiled biography of William Randolph Hearst.
And Hearst was one of the most powerful newspaper tycoons in the entire world.
He was, and Hearst was furious. I mean, he banned any mention of the film across his entire media empire and even pressured the Hollywood studios to pool their money, buy the negative, and literally burn it.
Looking objectively at the source material, it's a really fascinating clash of ideologies here.
Oh, so?
Well, you have Welles, who is a massive vocal supporter of FDR's New Deal. He even actively campaigned for Roosevelt. And then you have Hearst, who was a staunchly conservative magnate.
Right, totally opposite ends.
Exactly. And regardless of where you fall in that political spectrum of political spite, or was it simply because Hearst's life offered the perfect dramatic arc for a character study?
You know, whatever his initial motivation was, Wells definitely used the framework of Hearst's life to dissect the corrupting nature of absolute power. The film explores the tragedy of a man who builds this massive empire but loses his soul in the process.
The irony there is so thick.
Oh, it's incredibly ironic, because Citizen Kane was basically a warning about unchecked power, which directly foreshadowed Wells's own impending battles with the absolute power structures of the studio system.
And Hearst's boycott was incredibly effective. Citizen Kane failed at the box office initially. It received 9 Oscar nominations, but only walked away with 1 for Best Original Screenplay.
And that was largely because industry extras engaged in block voting against it out of fear of Hearst's wrath.
Exactly. By making such a powerful enemy on his very first film, Welles effectively removed his own safety net. So when he inevitably stumbled on his next project, there was absolutely no one left in the executive suites willing to catch him.
No one at all. And that stumble happens on his second film, The Magnificent Ambersons. In the middle of editing it, the U.S. government asks Welles to go to Brazil.
Right, as a goodwill ambassador during World War II, to film a documentary called It's All True.
He was actively supporting the Roosevelt administration's good neighbor policy, aiming to promote hemispheric solidarity against the Axis powers. And he did this entirely for free.
Totally unpaid.
So he rushes a rough edit of Ambersons in Miami, leaves his editor with detailed notes, and flies down to Rio. But while he is physically out of the country, the ground just falls out from under him back in Hollywood.
RKO undergoes a massive management change.
His protective boss is ousted. The new executives hold test screenings for Ambersons, the audiences react poorly to the downbeat ending, and the studio just panics.
They completely capitalized on his physical absence. RKO literally seized the film. They cut nearly 50 minutes of his meticulously crafted footage, shot a jarring, generic happy ending, and then, to top it off, they fired him from the studio.
Imagine custom building a breathtaking, intricate architectural masterpiece of a home. You leave the front door unlocked to go overseas to do charity work, and while you're gone, the bank forecloses, guts all your custom woodwork, and turns your masterpiece into a generic strip mall.
That is exactly what it felt like. And they didn't just fire him, they launched a brutal PR smear campaign to justify their actions.
Yeah, they leaked stories to the press.
Claiming Welles was down in Brazil throwing money away on a chaotic shoot without a script. RKO even hauled out a new corporate motto, which was showmanship in place of genius.
Wow. A direct, incredibly public slap in the face.
Absolutely.
Welles later admitted that attack permanently damaged his reputation. He lost the protective shield of his original RKO contract, and from 1942 onward, he was a man without a studio.
And this is where the narrative usually shifts, right? People start talking about his tragic decline. But looking closely at the rest of his life in these sources, he didn't quit.
No, he didn't.
He just pivoted. Stripped of studio backing, he relocated to Europe for long stretches and reinvented himself as the ultimate independent filmmaker.
He starts taking acting jobs in other directors' films, like his legendary turn as Harry Lime in The Third Man. But he wasn't doing it to stay famous or just to act.
No, he was treating his acting career like an ATM.
Exactly, to fund his own directing passion projects.
The production of his film Othello is the prime example of this hustle. It was a logistical nightmare. He self-financed it over the course of 3 years, shooting on location in Italy and Morocco.
3 years for one shoot.
Yes. And whenever he ran out of money, he would just pause production, fly off to act in a totally different movie, collect his paycheck, and then fly back to shoot another scene.
That is wild.
You literally have scenes where an actor delivers a line in one country, and the reverse shot of the other person reacting was filmed a year later in another country entirely.
But despite that absolute chaos, Othello still went on to win the top prize at the Cannes Film Festival.
Which is just a testament to his talent.
He also made Chimes at Midnight, a Shakespearean mashup that he actually considered his personal favorite film. And that independence, it extended beyond cinema, too. Once he was free of those studio PR departments, he became a really progressive political voice.
Oh, definitely.
He used his radio platform to forcefully advocate for Isaac Woodard, who was a Black World War II veteran brutally blinded by police. Welles relentlessly demanded justice on the airwaves, using his celebrity to force the nation to pay attention.
He used whatever leverage he had left. And that resilience is what makes his brief return to Hollywood in 1958 for Touch of Evil so compelling.
Yeah, the 1958 return.
He was originally hired purely as an actor for that one, but the film's star, Charlton Heston, actually demanded that Welles direct it.
And he delivers the film, on time and on budget. But during post-production, history basically repeats itself. The studio sneaks in, re-edits the movie behind his back, and shoots new scenes to, quote, clarify the plot.
And when Welles found out, he didn't just walk away this time. He wrote a passionate, incredibly detailed 58-page memo to the studio executives.
58 pages.
He broke down the intricate sound design, the pacing, exactly how his vision was supposed to work. He was practically begging them to restore it.
And what did they do?
They ignored him completely.
Okay, but there is some vindication here. Because decades later, in 1998, the legendary film editor Walter Murch took that exact 58-page memo and used it as a blueprint to re-edit Touch of Evil exactly to Welles' specifications.
It took 40 years, but the world finally saw the film he intended.
It completely validates his genius. The vision was always sharp. It was the corporate structure that simply couldn't accommodate a mind that absolutely refused to compromise.
Which really reframes those later years entirely. People see him doing those Palmas and wine commercials, or narrating Bugs Bunny documentaries, voicing Unicron, appearing on talk shows with Merv Griffin and Dick Cavett.
And they think it's a tragic end.
Right. But when you really step back and look at it, wasn't he basically running the 1970s version of Kickstarter?
That is such a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
He was crowdfunding decades before the internet made it easy. Every single commercial voiceover, every talk show appearance was a paycheck he could funnel directly back into the editing room for his unfinished films.
He never stopped making art. He just had to hustle for every single dollar because he refused to play by the studio's rules. Today, we look at that and we call him the pioneer of independent cinema.
He really is the blueprint for every creator who refuses to dilute their vision. He proved that true artistry often requires operating entirely outside the established system, even if that system is what made you famous in the first place.
Exactly.
His visual style, his use of deep focus, his sheer courage, it permanently altered the trajectory of cinema.
He was a one-of-a-kind force who proved that independence is often the price of genius.
It really is.
Yeah.
To wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought. We talked about the Magnificent Ambersons earlier, and those 50 minutes of footage that RKO cut while Welles was out of the country.
The lost masterpiece.
Yeah. Film historians often refer to that missing footage as the holy grail of lost cinema. And the reason it's lost, the reason we can't just go find it, is because RKO reportedly melted down the excised negative to extract the silver nitrate to support the war effort.
It is gone forever.
It's gone. I want you to imagine what those 50 minutes might have looked like. What visual miracles, what emotional depths were locked in those reels. And consider this, is the true tragedy that the footage was lost? Or is the real tragedy that the world expects visionary geniuses to fit neatly into corporate boxes in the first place?